All right. Welcome aboard, everyone. I'm going to sit here for a second and see if we can get a few folks to come on. But today's topic, or tonight's topic, is how to waste your pond budget in a hurry. I've, uh, I'm glad to see all the guys on the internet. I figured it would go this way. They don't have content. New and interesting content is hard to come by. When I will look at YouTube or TikTok or whatever, Instagram, it's all the same stuff. How many different ways can you describe dragging a worm or working a jerk bait or, pick any lure, you know? Um, Especially if you're not a professional fisherman with, an army, a bag of tricks, so to speak, and vast amounts of experience. Aside from talking about new lures uh, or some type of technique, what have you really got? And I've noticed some of the YouTube creators have moved into the pond management field because it's an endless supply of content. You have tons of different topics. Hey, welcome aboard, you guys. If you have any questions, throw them in there. Talking about how to waste your money in pond management and the patterns to look for. You guys have been following. I won't call anybody's name out, but you've seen the pond content that goes by, and it strongly resembles my career because I struggle with getting guys to listen to me. They would always make the same mistakes, and ultimately they'd be cutting the check. So they kind of did what they wanted with their ponds. I guess for lack of a better term, now what is the term I'm looking for? Confirmation bias, I think, is the best way to describe it. They go online, they do a little bit of research, they come to an idea about how the pond should be managed or what they should do. You see it in the YouTube or the Facebook pond groups are the worst for it. And then they post a question, and they're really not asking a question. What's up, Frank? Welcome aboard, man. These guys really aren't asking a question. What they're looking for is confirmation bias. They're looking for other people to tell them what they think is right because they've already come to the decision in their head. And I've done this for so long and watched it so many times. Uh, and you've seen it here. I'm telling guys what they don't want to hear. I'm telling guys what they need to hear, but it's not what they want to hear because they don't understand how this works completely. So the mistakes that they make are the same mistakes because everybody who doesn't, it's like any other job, if you, whatever you do for a living, if you just brought the general public into your job, you would see them make the same mistakes as well, that, they don't fully understand what they're doing and they would make the same mistakes. You see with any job, train any new hire, anybody who's trained anybody at a position, when you bring somebody in and they've never done the job before, you'll see a pattern in the mistakes that they make. And that's what I'm looking at when I watch YouTube or anybody with pond content. They all make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And it doesn't even matter how fast I grow my fish or how well I try to explain these things. They get it in their head that this is the way that they're going to do it, and it's all over with. It's actually a big reason why I sold my business, because I couldn't manage the ponds properly, really. It's a juggling act between even when you have one pond owner, it can be challenging to get the confirmation bias out of him. But flipping kicks, there we go. He actually, you took it out of my mouth. I was just about to say, when you've got a homeowners association, you will absolutely never get the job done properly because you have to appease an entire group of people. And then you've got every single person's, like, say you have a 5-person board. Well, each one of those people have some sort of bias and, or at least some sort of idea of how this is done or how it should be done because of their limited amount of research. And they're an absolute nightmare to deal with. Now, as we talked about prior post or a prior live here, um, homeowner associations are a great place to make money. You have a collection of people that all kick in, so they have a budget, and you'll have basic needs, basic pond needs, algae control, weed control, fountain maintenance, garbage removal, all those things that are aesthetically pleasing. You can make a nice living on. I did for years. But the actual fisheries management will get line items right off there. Most of the people who live in the HOA don't fish. And then the ones that do will fall into that confirmation bias. You're not dealing with other fisheries professionals, you're dealing with novices. So every single one of those guys will have a different opinion on how this should be tackled. But let's get to flipping kicks. Let's get to Alex's question here. All right, we got $4,500 for an existing pond in an HOA. You can't drain it and has bluegill and thin bass, 60 to 85%, and stunted crappie. You already have a feeder in place. Go. Well, that's not a hypothetical question, Alex. That sounds very familiar. I've dealt with this many times. Okay. So here is a common misconception that'll be made. The guys will come onto my page and they will see that bass under 100% relative weight aren't growing properly. And I'll talk about harvest and harvesting the fish. And they immediately go right to harvesting the fish. But there's one caveat right there: stunted crappie. Okay. When I say things, again, they don't know exactly what I'm talking about, right? They don't know all the ins and outs of this. They have a competing species there. And it's just one, and it's just crappie. And all ponds have crappie. So you don't want crappie in a pond. And the smaller the pond, the worse this situation gets. So what Alex, or flipping kicks for you guys who don't know Alex personally, is describing is a bass population that has been stunted. It has been depleted because of the competition of the crappie, not because of an overcrowded bass situation. So there's one perfect example of taking a small fact. It's almost like what they call a straw man argument, where you take a fact over here and you try to apply it over here, but it's not the same situation. Yes, we can remove bass from a pond that has no crappie and get the bass to grow again. That's a fact. You're not going to have that in a population with crappie. So what Alex is describing, I've seen many times when crappie are very limiting. So what you have to do is you have to put really heavy fishing pressure on the crappie. You have to try to deplete their population down as much as possible. And the problem with that is it depends on the pond, and it can sometimes be impossible to do. Now, I said sometimes, right? Because we have variability from pond to pond. Sometimes, other times, you can go do a lot of crappie harvest and get pretty good results, and swing that pond back around quite nicely. Other times, not so much. Why that occurs, I'm not exactly sure. I don't even think there's any. The studies that I've seen just say don't stock crappie in ponds. They don't blend in, they don't mix well. They create the situation that you're describing. You're doing everything right pond management wise, but you're still seeing, some limited bass growth. Now, in this particular hypothetical situation, we haven't had enough time yet. We're going to need a couple of seasons. Uh, since you have a feeder in place, you're boosting the bluegill up, and that is making the bluegill heavier. So the bass that eat those bluegill are getting more weight. But the problem that you have in that situation is those bass, even though they're nice, healthy looking, relatively healthy looking at 80 in the 80s is 85% is pretty good. I'm not complaining about that size fish with crappie, but they've been stunted for a really long time. So they could be really old. So forward looking, what we're looking at is growing those fish that are born in, because the ones that have been stunted with crappie, they could have parasites. They're definitely older fish. They're kind of coming to the end of their life. And this also kind of falls back into when I tell you guys not to relocate bass, don't take bass and put them other places. If you have a place that's producing good, like say 8-pound fish or 9-pound fish, and you're, I'm gonna take it and put it in my pond. Okay, you're making the assumption, or you're making too many assumptions. Okay, if the pond that you're going to stock them into doesn't have 8-pounders, adding 8-pounders isn't going to fix it. They don't have the forage base there to support them. If they did, there would be 8-pounders there. I'll say that again in a slightly different way. If bass have the forage to grow to 8 pounds, they will grow to 8 pounds. And if they don't, they won't. And adding an 8-pound fish into a place that doesn't have the sufficient forage they're going to get smaller, not bigger. And that's where guys get lost on that, because they don't understand the fishery doesn't have 8-pounders because it can't produce 8-pounders. They think that all fish grow the same. Like they have, it's a real juvenile or elementary school level of education on the aquatic environment. Because if the bass has a sufficient forage to climb up and get big, it will. Okay, it will chew and it'll grow and it'll go right up there to it. So that's a big reason why it's don't moving them around. I've seen guys do it. Oh my God, 1,000 times. I'm going to bring this big fish back and put it in my pond. Okay, well, and the other thing I've seen them too. I've seen guys take 8-pound fish and put them in their pond. At very least, you need to keep 8 1-pound bass out of the very same pond. You see where I'm going with that? You have to create space for that 8-pound bass. You can have 8 1-pounders or you can have 1 8-pounder, but you can't have both. So when you just start adding 8-pound fish in there, okay, it just doesn't work. There's a reason why you don't have 8-pound fish in there, and it's because you don't have the forage base to support them. You've got something off. It's like stairs, right? If you're going to go up a flight of stairs, and first step, second step, third step, fourth step. All right. Instead of it being steps, let's make it inch classes in bass. All right. 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch. Okay. So if you have the proper balance of your fishery, it'll look just like that staircase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll go right up to 24, 25-inch fish. If you don't, there'll be a gap. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. They'll get to about 11 or 12. You either have competition from crappie, you have big bass, or you have too many bass, or any other problem species that could create that. And then that it stops. Okay. And you don't have any 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-inch fish. Then usually ponds, a few fish will get big enough, and you might have 1 or 2, 8-pound, 9-pound fish kicked out of that. But there's a huge gap there, and that's an indicator of what's going on. Most of the fish in the pond are skewed down to 1 pound or under. The very few bass that are lucky enough to grow and get big just blow right past the 3, 4, 5, 6 pound size class and go right to 7 or 8 pounds because every meal is 1 pound. And that's a pretty common pattern that you see in bass stunted fisheries. Basically, you have stunted bass and bass that can eat stunted bass, and they explode with growth. But in Flipping Kicks, to finish up with his question, you can do what you can do. And if you don't get the results that you're wanting, there's not much else you can do. I've literally seen guys go out and, harvest thousands of crappie from a pond, and the fishing only get worse, right? Not better. And they put in years of effort and hard work catching all those fish out, and it goes against them, not for them. That's something that can totally happen to you. It's out of your control. Okay. Now, in your situation with your HOA, you can't drain the pond. You have to do what you can do. All you can do is just keep trying. I'd recommend that come late February, March, depending on the weather, maybe even April, whenever those crappie go to spawning, that pre-spawn spawning time of the crappie, they become very susceptible to being caught. And you'll have days that you can really catch a lot of them. And on those days, you need to make an effort to keep every crappie that you catch. And you'll be surprised how much biomass they're tying up. It's the same principle as what we described over at the Silver River, where you've got 85% of the rivers in 5-pound blue tilapia that only leaves you 15% game fish. I think you're doing everything right over there. I think your fishing is going to come back around. You're just going to need at least one more year of doing things right. This is a slow process, Alex. Yeah, no, O'Neill, you nailed it. Really, you really nailed it. And if you're a betting man, you're going to lay a bet on it. I'm betting on what happened to you. You're going to bust your tail for 2 years, and you're going to get worse results than what you started with. And if you just would have pulled the plug on it and started it over and restocked and done it all properly, right now your bass would be just like mine at Sugar Hill Outdoors. They'd be 3 to 5 pounds and charging right towards 8-pounders. You'll be going to be into 6 to 8 pound fish in 3 years, 3.5 years. Right. So all that wasted time trying to save something you can't save. Okay. So that ties right back into mistakes that guys make. And that's a big one that I've seen. I'm going to go and fix it. I can fix it. I'm going to go catch enough of these fish. Like, I'm different. I'm not going to listen to science. I'm not going to listen to experience. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to hard charge into it. And the problem with that is, even when they do hard charge into it, and even when they do get some beneficial results, they can't maintain that level of like hard charger, because it's a permanent thing. If it's working for you, you have to do it every year. You can't drop off. If you drop off just for one season, the crappie will get right back up on top of you, and you start right back where you were, if you get any results at all. So I try to explain that to guys, if they would just listen. They don't listen. Drain it. You'll be, and again, even when you drain it, I see this too. Drain it dry. All right. The goal is to eradicate the fish population that you have completely and start from scratch. If you don't do it, if you leave some crappie, if you leave some bass, even if they're this big, they don't even have to be very big. You don't want predatory fish in the pond when you try to reintroduce the bluegill, because you need a certain number of bluegill to go in there for a certain amount of time and establish. If you have predators that are eating them immediately, that's going to disrupt the balance immediately, and you've shot yourself in the foot, and your drain and restock won't work. Again, something I've seen many, many times. Some ponds can't be drained completely. You can't dry them out. You've got stream coming in, or a deep hole, kind of the way the pond lays out. It doesn't, the drain is kind of higher than the bottom of the pond. So you're left with a couple feet of water. You're in a real bad situation when you get to that point, because what you really need to do is go rent one of those big pumps and pump it out, drain it out, eradicate the fish population completely. Alex's point with the HOAs, I've been in HOAs that have to have dam repairs, and they drain the pond down for the dam repair, but they didn't drain the pond down low enough to be able to eradicate the fish population. There's a chemical that we use called rotenone, and it kills the fish. It suffocates them. Actually, how it works is rotenone is like a ground up plant from South America. It's a root of a plant. I believe it's called a Derris plant, Derris, if I remember correctly. It goes into the bloodstream through the gills, just like oxygen. It binds to the red blood cells. And since the rotenone is bound to the red blood cell can't hold oxygen anymore, and the fish suffocate. I've seen guys try this before too, many times. They try to use that product on a full pond, not understanding that you won't get even distribution of it. That's why you have to drain the water down. You need that stuff in high enough concentration and an even distribution for it to work. If you have a full pond, you won't be able to treat it properly. You won't kill all the fish, even with rotenone. There's one real good way you can mess up. You need to drain the water down. One, so it makes it much easier to get the concentrations you need and not have pockets of safety pockets where they can hide from you, because they'll get away from it. They'll hide from you. They'll live through it. Or drain it flat, dry, where you're absolutely positive, you don't even need the chemical. But another reason why to drain it down is you don't have to deal with the chemical in the environment, even though it's just a ground up root. And it does break down. It doesn't last in the water. Depends on the water temperature as to how long rotenone lasts. If it's in cold water, it'll last all winter. But if it's in warm water, it breaks down in, I think it's about a week or two. Although you can also go behind it with pool shock. Chlorine will detox rotenone. And I've actually used pool shock to detox rotenone and stock the same week. But those are professional tricks that people wouldn't be able to do just by me describing them on here. You need experience to do all of this, really. So, but even on the drain and restock, most guys will not do it right. And since they didn't do it right, they won't get the results that I get at Sugar Hill. They'll be messed up right from the beginning, and it'll be obvious. The fish won't grow like I'm getting them to grow here. Oh, absolutely, Alex. No problem, man. Stay the course, brother. Put those crappie in a cooler. I think that pond will come back around. I've seen some ponds that will come back around nicely, and I think yours is one of them. Yeah, it depends, man. I bet you we get some 6-pound fish by the end of this year in Sugar Hill. I mean, we've already got them to 5, and we still have several months left in the growing season. So it'll be, spring of 22 to fall of 24. Not even 3 full years, and I'll have fish over 6 pounds. And that's actually pretty easy to do when you do it right, in the southeastern United States anyway. Bass grow really fast in the right environment, in the right conditions. When you set it, again, when it's done right, it works great. When it's done wrong, it doesn't. Okay, so you can't, I'm assuming, Kyle, you mean shock. You prefer to shock the pond. The shocking, even if I turn the electrofishing boat on to kill the fish with the shocking, it won't kill not enough fish. It won't do anything. I couldn't kill enough fish with an electrofishing boat to matter. Electrofishing is just a way to sample the fish population. Really no different than the cast net, or really no different than going fishing and just writing down the lengths and the weights and giving me the relative weights of the fish. I don't need to see every fish in the pond to understand whether the pond is healthy or not. So drain it is the answer to that. There's no other way to do it. Drain that sucker dry. There's also an advantage too to draining it. You expose the pond bottom to the air, and that changes the soil chemistry in the bottom of the pond. You can, if you've got, say, you've got a buildup of pine straw or what's, detritus, just organic material, and you got a heavy amount of it in the bottom of the pond. On situations like that, I might recommend that you leave it drained for like a year. Just open up the bottom and expose that pond bottom for an entire 12 months or even a little longer, because the rotting process is slowed down underwater, especially the deeper the water gets, because in the summertime, there won't be oxygen very deep, and the rotting process needs oxygen. So if you expose all that crap to the bottom, and you can't dig it out with a loader, a backhoe or something, don't have that kind of bread, which most people don't, just expose the pond bottom for a year and let all that stuff break down, because in the atmosphere at that point, there's a lot more oxygen. The rotting process is much faster, and it will greatly improve the soil quality, the chemistry of the soil in the bottom of the pond. If you need any lime in your area or something like that, it's easier to apply when the lake is dry. Instead of trying to load it onto a barge or dump it out of a boat, you can just have the truck drive in and spread it. There's a lot of reasons why, letting it be dry for a while is a great benefit to you when you start over. And you really won't get many people to start them over, it's just, it triggers something in them that I'm not even sure what it is. A lack of understanding, because every single time I tell people that, they look at you, like, oh my God, you're nuts, but then fast forward it to like this point where, where Clint's getting with Sugar Hill, or you'll see some guys, I've seen several guys online who've restocked, got several guys who follow me and restock their ponds. They get to this 3 to 4 year, 5 years in, just a few years, and they've got great fishing, they've got great growth. And then the light goes on for them. They're like, and always say the same things. I should have done this years ago, and that's a big part of why I put this on the internet, to try to encourage guys that if you have a pond problem, the cheapest way is to drain it and restock it. Usually, if I own one, I do it every 10 years. You can't manage it any other way and get this kind of growth, right? Even for the guys who've got whatever out of whack, even if it's just like a stunted bass population that can be corrected, even then I recommend draining it and restocking it, because I can't create this 6 pounds in 2.5 years growth rate that I could if you drain it. It's some kind of misinformation that's gone around. People think the lake needs to be old for there to be big fish, and it absolutely doesn't. I've seen, it's been documented in Georgia, 13-1 in 4 years on a tagged bass in a 100-acre lake in Okmulgee. They caught the bass year 3. It was a tag fish they stocked originally. They caught it in the electrofishing survey year 3. It was, I believe, 7.8 pounds. They got lucky, very lucky, in a 100-acre lake, and got the exact same fish up again a year later. At the end of the growing season, year 3, it was 7.8, so in the fall. Then the end of the growing season, year 4, they got the exact same fish again. It was 13-1. So it grew 5 pounds in one season. And that's what I mean by, if there's available forage, bass will crush it. Okay. And that's a perfect example. Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. Should have done it years ago. Okay, talking amongst yourselves, Oh, chemical shock. I got you. Yeah, so that's a common. Usually, what happens, Kyle, is it's a combination of both. You're going to drain it and then you're going to hit it with the rotenone. Like I said, the smaller volume of water is easier to treat. I literally want it down to puddles, less than knee deep and less than the area of the size of your house. That would be considered pretty big puddle, really. I don't want much water in there. If you try to do the rotenone treatment with it full, it won't work. I've never seen anybody do that and it work. I've seen a lot of people try, but it won't work. It somehow, some way, just wind and waves, pockets, springs, water flow, rain, whatever, there will be a little spot of fresh water in there and the fish will all go get into it, get away from that stuff and live right through that stuff. That's no way to do that. I've also seen a couple guys in groups talk about using hydrated lime on full ponds. Hydrated lime will swing the pH drastically. Once you go over about 100, 150 pounds of it per acre, you'll get a huge pH swing and you can kill fish with it that way too. But I don't like that idea either because I'm not so sure what that does to, that's not in the book. I mean, it will kill the fish and it's done at fish hatcheries, but just because they do it at a fish hatchery doesn't mean you should do it in a sport fishing pond. And what I mean by that is I don't know what that's going to do to the aquatic invertebrates in the bottom of the pond by putting that much hydrated lime in there. In a fish hatchery, they don't care about aquatic invertebrates. They feed the fish pellets. So it's irrelevant to them. And I wouldn't think, because I've used hydrated lime in certain situations before and it persists on the bottom of the pond a lot longer. Yes, it does swing the pH quickly. And yes, the pH does return back to normal, but you can also see that hydrated lime down on the bottom of the pond for years. And I'm not so sure if you were to try to attempt a fish kill, I don't know what the future would look like for your aquatic insect population. And keep in mind, 50% of your bluegill's diet is aquatic insects. So I would discourage against killing fish with hydrated lime in that manner. This stuff is all outlined at any, extension service. They'll do proper pond management. You can look it up online, how to do it. And they always recommend draining it down. They always recommend use the rotenone. Again, science is about producing consistent results. And that is the most consistent way. If you do get into it, you shouldn't be able to get rotenone. It is a restricted use chemical. It's usually supposed to be for professionals. If you do manage to get your hands on some, you need to be very careful. You need to wear safety equipment. You need to wear a respirator. You do not want to breathe that. It'll do the same thing to your blood as it does to the fish. It's very dangerous. You don't want to mess with it. Josh has got a question that's coming in. All right. Some stock in Northern Strain. Okay. In Indiana and 100 acres. It's on North. Okay, so first off, Josh, Northern Strain fish are just fish that don't live in Florida, for one thing. Like Georgia has Northern Strains or native strains. Some people put it that way. Only the Florida strain is only local to actual Florida. Now it's been spread with F1s and Floridas and stocking in ponds. Florida genetics are everywhere now. But I'm not really following the question on the best way to do it. Did you guys see the 12.5 pound bass that was caught in New York? Have you heard all these guys on the internet talk about how northern bass don't get that big, but yet there's the new New York record, which is busted? I doubt very seriously that's got Florida genetics in upstate New York in a big lake. So I don't really buy that. I think you have to have the right environment for them. And I think northern bass can get very big. I think Florida bass can get a little bit bigger. I think Florida bass are also a little bit harder to catch, and Florida bass, because of that, probably aren't handled as much and live a little bit longer, which might give them an advantage. But I don't come from the school of thought that the only bass that get big are Floridas. I've seen plenty of just run-of-the-mill places with run-of-the-mill what are considered northern bass that are absolute units. One of the places was my old stomping grounds back in Commerce. That place didn't have any Florida strain fish. Those fish were tanks. Again, they had the stair steps. They had the forage base to climb up on. They were limited in numbers. It was a 250-acre lake, so that changes things up quite a bit. Going from a pond to a mid-sized lake or small lake, I guess 250 would be, but a unique environment that was created by accident. Nobody managed that. I can remember telling the fisheries guy that does the electrofishing for Georgia about the lake, and I was like, he's like, well, we're not having, good success with growing big fish anywhere. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Some pretty big fish over here. And I started showing all the pictures that I put on here. The picture I'm holding that fish on my YouTube icon there came from that lake. That fish was about 8.5 pounds. It was only 22 inches long, but it was 8.5 pounds. He was stunned. He was absolutely shocked that there was, good bass over there. But just goes to show. All right, let's scroll back, make sure. I heard that, Kyle. I heard that. I don't think I missed anybody's questions up there. Good. I'm real good at doing that. So yeah, another mistake that I see guys make is assuming that they're going to make their bass bigger by stocking forage, and they're not. I've worked. I tried to discourage that there are certain types of forage that will work in very specific situations. Rainbow trout's one of them. But just generally speaking, I've watched these guys on YouTube, and they're constantly bringing in crawfish. They're constantly bringing in tilapia. They're constantly bringing in prawns. They're constantly bringing in, crawdads from Louisiana, and they're spending money on top of money on top of money, and their fish aren't growing faster than mine, are they? So my question is, why are you spending all that money if your fish aren't outgrowing mine? And I'm spending money on feed, high quality fish feed. That's it. Just feed the bluegill and make sure the balance stays proper, and your bass will grow just fine. And will some bass, every pond is different too. Some ponds are going to throw off bass growth way better than others. I've definitely seen that, where you do all the process right, everything's done properly, but for some reason, maybe it's water quality, maybe it's maybe it was the weather for the first 3 years that pond was established. Maybe it was something that I'm not even seeing, that I can't speak on because I didn't observe it, properly. But I would discourage my clients from stocking forage like that. Like, let's order, and they just want to spend money is what it is. They get a high off of shopping, and I know it is, because I've said, they go, well, is it going to hurt the pond? I'm like, well, no, it's not going to hurt the pond, but you're also not going to get what you think you're going to get. You're not going to get exceptionally high bass growth with your wallet. Exceptionally high bass growth is going to come from doing this right, feeding your bluegill right, managing the pond right, doing all these steps and being patient. Okay, you're not going to fast forward this with your wallet. And believe me, I've worked for dudes who've got deep pockets. They could pour some cash into it, and I always try to discourage them from doing that. But inevitably, they go online and they listen to a salesman instead of me. And then they I want to do it. And I tell them I'll be fine. All right, watch and see, boys. Watch. All right, our average. We took our data set. We did our relative weights at the pond. Right. I'm getting 110 to 125% relative weight, let's say, on my bass at Sugar Hill, I could go spend $5,000, $10,000 in forage poured in there. The relative weights are going to be exactly the same. You're not going to change that because you have to consistently feed the bass so much. Nobody has that much money. And I would tell them that, to be honest with them. And they would always say the same thing. Yeah, but it makes me feel better. Science doesn't care about your feelings. Makes me feel better. Like I'm like you're like a 8-year-old girl, like your feelings matter. I'm sorry, Josh. I'm just not understanding exactly what you're asking me. Bass are stocked the same way. Yeah, there's no difference in stocking. Like if you take bass from a hatchery to a pond, you just or a lake, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the genetic strain. You just make sure that the temperature on the tank is the same temperature as the lake water, and you stock them. The genetics won't make any difference if that's the question you're asking me. All right, Chase has got one. In a pond with excessive flow, you can't keep the pH and alkalinity where you need it. 5 tons, 2 years later, we're at less than 30. Yep. I wouldn't worry about it. If you're on a feeder, so there's 2 schools of thought on how to boost the productivity of the pond. The first way is fertilization. We're going to boost the phytoplankton bloom. Denser plankton equals more fish per acre. Okay. There's a second school, another way to do that, and you're doing that with the feeder. Okay. So you're skipping the plankton part of it. Okay. It sounds like with alkalinity that low, you're in Georgia, because I've dealt with that a lot. If you're not in Georgia, throw up where you are. I'd be interested in knowing where that is. But I've dealt with this a bunch in Georgia. It doesn't matter that much, actually. Your water quality will swing a little bit more, like your pH and stuff will swing a little bit more because you don't have the buffering capacity. But with a feeder, you're putting feed onto the bluegill and kind of skipping the plankton part of it, right? So now we're kind of getting into technicalities on that. And I guess the point being, Chase, is I have grown absolute units in less than 10 parts per million. Okay. I've been in the exact same situation that you're in, where you can't keep the alkalinity and hardness high enough with the lime. And the bass will it's a natural kind of environment. All right. It happens. Is it textbook perfect? Absolutely not. It's also not going to slow you up that bad. If you're not seeing good bass growth in that situation, though, I would not attribute that to water quality. I would attribute that to a balance problem. Do you have crappie? Do you have some other kind of fish in there that's messing it up? Because I know that you can have some problems with like recruitment sometimes with low alkalinity and hardness. Reproduction might not be as successful sometimes, but that's usually not a bad thing. Usually ponds are too many bass in them anyway, so having a little bit of issues with that's not a big deal. But I've grown really nice fish and significantly softer water than 30 parts per million. So I wouldn't panic about that. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, Kyle, I'm kind of with you on that. I don't like stocking crawfish. When I was on the Tackle Talk podcast with Andrew, we did that bake breakdown deal. It was like a 4-part series. And the one thing that I took away from he had a crawfish PhD level dude studying crawfish. And the one thing I kind of took away from his points were not even all the crawfish. They're still identifying new species of crawfish. So to me, the native crawfish in your environment, in your area, wherever you are going to be better and more productive than crawfish that you get out of Southern Louisiana, right? Um, you're always going to have a natural crawfish population, that's just something that kind of occurs everywhere. So again, that's a supplemental kind of thing. There are a few rivers and places like Alex Rudd has talked about, we've talked about that a few times, where the crawfish are just, balling out of control, and smallmouth bass and rivers are getting huge on them and things like that. But in ponds, it's just kind of a supplemental thing that'll be there, kind of like frogs. You'll always have frogs too. Are frogs going to change is there going to be enough frogs produced to significantly change the weight of the bass? No. I never really did like stocking those crawfish. Half the time they came to you and they were just dead anyway, at least back when I was doing it. Maybe they've gotten better at that now, but I'm not a real big advocate of stocking like that, but I do agree. Gizzard shad. Now, gizzard shad can, like anything else, gizzard shad especially, can kind of run you out of the gym, so to speak. You have to put gizzard shad in the right situation, or they'll do the exact same thing that happened at the Silver River, using that as an example with those tilapia. 85% of the lake or pond is gizzard shad, which only leaves 15% of the pot for game fish. Now you're in a situation you need to drain it and kill it. But as long as you have a bass population big enough to handle gizzard shad, they're a really excellent source of forage. And rainbow trout, kind of the same way. Yeah, I know what you're saying, Chase. The lime can be a hassle, expensive, and again, you're in a situation where it's not working for you due to water flow. So don't worry about it; it'll be fine. No, it's the balance is the balance, Josh. Um, it's not that technical. 40, 50, but well, in a bigger lake, if you examples, 100-acre lake, you're always going to have crappie, you're always going to have perch, you're always going to have, competing species of fish. So since you're going to have competing fish, to get your bass growing, they're going to take a piece of the pie, so to speak. So your bass population might be down at 35, 30, maybe even low as like 25 bass per acre. It's going to depend on the area and what you're going for. And again, at 100 acres, that's usually public water. So they're going to be stocking it for diversity. They're going to be stocking it for public fishing. They're trying to appease many different fishermen, not just trophy bass fishermen, where the context of what I've been talking about in my ponds and small lake management, most of the time, that's always directed towards trophy bass management. So that's another place guys get confused, is I'm talking about trophy bass management in private water. They're talking about trying to grow trophy bass in public water, where the game warden and the fishery biologist guys and all of their bosses and everything are looking at it from the most diversity of fish that they can provide to the public, because it is public. There's more than just trophy bat. There's cat fishermen. There's, all kinds of fishermen. So they're managing that lake in a completely different way because it's public, because they have to, not everybody's a trophy bass fisherman. Georgia. Called it. Yeah, man. That comes from bad forestry practices from this late 1700s. Georgia used to have a beautiful, dark, rich, black soil, 8-9 feet of it, according to the old science. And bad forestry practices. Basically, they clear cut Georgia for the wood, and that caused a massive erosion problem, and all that nice, beautiful soil that we used to have from millions of years of, oak trees and cedar trees and pine trees and all the trees that we have in Georgia. All that washed off into the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, and we were left with the clay layer. And that then massive debacle basically created the forestry school at the University of Georgia, because the University of Georgia is the oldest public university in the country. 1785, I believe, the University of Georgia started. And then the forestry school, very powerful, very good school. When I was there, we were number 2 behind, I think, University of Washington for forestry school rankings, however you would do that. But the University of Georgia Forestry School is a very strong school, because what guys don't realize, the pine tree industry in Georgia is very strong due to our now acidic soil that was created by that. They grow a lot of pine trees and they cut a lot of pine trees. So Georgia actually cuts more trees than any state in the country, and they also get more revenue from the paper companies and things like that for tree science. So the forestry school at the University of Georgia is exceptional for all those reasons. In your situation, you might be wasting your money on thread fins. I've noticed a trend on thread fins and clear, because generally whenever you get all right, so it's kind of a systemic thing. When you have low hardness and alkalinity, you'll have lighter, usually have really clear water, and gizzard and threadfin shad don't do well in that clear water. They do better in the greener, like more fertilized water. They're filter feeders. They just filter the plankton right out of the water, where your gizzard shad will root the bottom a little more. They're more like a scraper type of feeder. If you have a good bass population, you will get some decent bass growth off of gizzard shad. But we have to remember, the gizzard shad are going to displace your bluegill, right? When you add gizzard shad into a pond, let's just say, for example, you have 1,000 acres or 1,000 pounds of bluegill forage in the pond, all right? And then you add gizzard shad to it. You're not increasing the amount of forage that's available. You'll still have 1,000 pounds of forage. Now you'll just have 500 pounds of bluegill and 500 pounds of gizzard shad. And gizzard shad grow 8 inches in a season. So you have big forage. You're going to skew the entire forage population, or half the forage population, or maybe even more than that, towards 8 to 11 or 12 inch shad. So if you have a bass population that can capitalize on that, and the pond layout kind of matters too. I prefer a shallow pond that winds more like a river than a big open one with deep water for gizzard shad. I'd avoid gizzard shad in like big open water scenarios. And like the scenario we've got at Sugar Hill, I'll probably will add a few gizzard shad just to see what happens. We got the bluegill on a feeder to help compete with the gizzard shad, taking their natural food away. We probably will use some gizzard shad in there starting this year, but I did not stock gizzard shad initially with the original pond stocking. One, just to prove to people you can grow bass perfectly good on just bluegill. And two, adding the gizzard shad in at this point, I'm skewing it. The goal of the pond is trophy bass management. So I'm skewing the pond towards larger bass forage. Again, I'm having more forage going towards the top end, so my bigger bass have more food to eat. But when I do that, I'm also taking away from the bottom end. So I'm going to have to do heavy harvest on my 1 pound bass, because I don't want them to stunt. And since I've taken split the bluegill population in half by adding the gizzard shad, that means I'm going to be able to grow half as many 1 pounders as I was able to grow this year. Does that make sense? I'm going to have to do more harvest on my smaller fish so they don't slow their growth down, because they don't have the bluegill forage that they used to have after adding the gizzard shad. Now we're getting technical, boys. The old giant bullfrogs. I want a giant bullfrog pattern for down here, dude. The bullfrogs down here are balling out of control. I have yet to see a bullfrog pattern. I want like Mike does the 11-inch glide. I want like an 11-inch bullfrog. I hear you, Frank. If I wish I could grow some muskie around here, man, I would enjoy them. If I was up north, I think that's probably all I would fish for, are those big muskie. Those look like fun to me. I've never caught one. It's about time. It's hot as crap down here, so it's about time to head towards the coast and try the snook out again. Um, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, Drew. I need to talk to the G Crack boys. We need a frog, a big one. Like I need like big this with like legs like this and this. And you could do it on the floaty material too, man. That sucker would float in the surface. I want a giant frog. The tiger muskie and the pike. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I hear you, Josh. I think that would work good, especially around here. Like you should hear, you should hear the size of the frogs, man. It's like Frogzilla back there. I mean, it's like the croaks that you hear back there, and when the sun's coming up, it's like, good Lord, that is this little dink frog that I'm throwing. Those frogs are eating. I've actually caught frogs on frogs out there. Oh, Chase, man, otters are a problem. Yeah, otters will kill everything you got just to kill it. They're cute little critters, but man, they are freaking hammers on fish, man. We had them get into at Georgia. We were in aquaculture class. We would have it in the springtime, and we get like little tiny baby catfish in. We stocked them into a third of an acre. We fed them all summer. And one summer, I hung out in Athens all summer. I wasn't taking any classes, but I was in town all summer. So part of my job was to go over and feed the catfish every day for the fall class. And then when fall came around, our job was to grow them from fry to 1 pound. So the first year I was there, everything went fine. And the spring, we stocked the fish. In the fall, we harvested the fish, and we would have like a day where the kids with special needs came out and they could fish in the pond and catch all. They could catch them on bare hooks. There were so many fish in there, but they'd throw worms and livers and whatever in there and catch the fish, and they had fun. And then we'd clean them all up, and we had a big fish fry at the end of the day. And actually we would pull the drain after the kids got done fishing, pull the drain them down, seine the pond off, and get literally all the catfish out and clean them up, give them to people who wanted them, whatever. But the second year I was there, I did the same thing. I was in town for the summer. I was taking classes that year, but I still fed the catfish. But that year, otters came up from the Oconee River, and we went from having 3,000 catfish and a third of an acre to 3 catfish, literally 3 catfish in a third of an acre. We did not have the special needs kids. We did not have the fish fry. We did not have anything because the otters found it. And literally they would go in, catch a catfish, take it up on the bank, gorge themselves on it until they were sick, throw up, go back and catch another one, and repeat the process. They're greedy, and they kill them just to kill them. We had some of the wildlife students come out and explain that, like what was going on. He's like, okay, see, that scat is otters, and these tracks are otters. And because you couldn't see them, I never saw them once. They'd come in the middle of the night, but you'd go out there and there'd be, 20, 30, 40 dead catfish up on the bank. And I'm like, is that a pile of vomit? What's going on? So I again, with the wildlife biology people right there, we got them over there and they're like, yeah, you got otters. That is vomit. That is scat. That is their tracks. These are otters. I never saw one otter though. Like I was there every day and I never saw one of them do it. I never went out there in the middle of the night either, but they absolutely wasted that pond. So kind of how that goes. Yeah, I picked one of those up, Frank. I haven't used it yet, but I saw one of those. I think nope, I put it in the tackle box, but it was right over there. All right, 10-acre pond catching DDs every year. Heavy harvest. Yep, that's usually what happens when you're catching DDs every year. Yeah, nothing bigger than sevens ever since. That's too bad. They do that. Yeah, right. Frank says, well, I tell you, man, if you could control the otters, that's the thing. You can't control them, man. Yep. Interesting. Yeah, we get some bald eagles fishing around here too. I don't think the bald eagles are greedy like otters, though. I mean, they definitely are going to catch some fish on you, and they can definitely catch any size fish that they want. I mean, they're certainly going to tote off whatever they want to tote off. But I have never personally like gone to a pond where there was a bald eagle and been like, "Oh, geez, the bald eagle has destroyed the fish population." I don't think that's a thing. Oh, that's a good question, Josh. I don't have it right here. I'd show it to you. But Mike Buka makes a rat lure it's about 8 inches, six to eight. Nah, it's probably longer than six. It's probably like 7 or 8 inches long. He makes a couple of them. One of them it's like a wake rat with like a jointed back, but I didn't get that one. I got the solid rat, and what's sweet about it is the tail is got like a pin in it, and I put a methylate or a white. You can do like a trick worm for the tail, so you basically got a trick worm and a rat. But the Buka rat without the bill works like a spook. It looks nasty too. I've caught a few fish on it. I haven't fished it as hard as I should, but I have a lot of confidence in Mike's rat. The times that I fish with Mike, he's used that exact rat, and I watched him work. I was like, oh, that rat is sweet. Oh, geese, swans. I don't have that much experience with swans. I can tell you that you need to be really careful around swans. They're very territorial, and in their wing, like how like their wing folds like this, right? Right in the elbow of their wing is about a baseball sized joint. And I can remember once there was a young man that was like an intern for one of the companies I subcontracted for, and I heard a story about him. Witnessed some of it from a distance. I didn't really know what was going on. There was a swan on a pond, and he was very territorial. And the kid didn't think that would be a very big deal, that he would just go in and do what he wanted to do. 20-year-old guys that don't listen. And he got stomped the hell out by that swan. The swan jacked him across the knee with that knuckle, got him on the ground, and went to work on him like Larry Holmes. I mean, just jacked that kid up. So watch out for the swans. They're nothing to be trifled with. They will whoop your head, boy. As far as the geese go, though, I don't know that they're going to do any kind of their presence doesn't do really damage to the fish population, but what they are big 20-pound vegetarian birds, and their droppings have aquatic weed seeds in them. So where the geese go, they tend, if you think about it too, it's pretty smart. They're since they're vegetarians, they're transplanting the seeds to the areas where they like to be, where they're safer, and then the weeds begin to grow. So from a lake manager's standpoint, geese are really good job security because they tend to create really bad weed problems. And then those really bad weed problems can negatively impact your fish population. So it's not really a result of the geese being there affecting the fish, but it's the geese, then the weeds, then the lack of management of the weed problem that creates the fish population issues. Ooh, 11-inch rat. That's interesting. I haven't seen that one yet. Oh, Frank. Yeah. 12 swans on the 175. Now, see, I think in 175 acres, you're pretty safe. I mean, you can spread out, you can move away from them. This was a small pond. It was just like a 2-acre deal, where the swan was living on it. And there was no way. I mean, it was his, and you weren't doing anything with it. And just don't get your butt kicked by a swan, boys. You don't get any cool points for that one. Don't get any cool points taking a butt kicking from a swan. Oh, yes, the old 711. I like the Croy, man. I like all the Croy rods, honestly. I've heard some people don't like them, but I think St. Croix does a really good job. I've got that Legend glass rod, and man, that's a sticky rod. And another rod, if you don't want to spend the $300 on the Legend glass, that I think is just as effective is that Mojo glass. Have you seen that crankbait rod they make? It's like purple. It says Mojo, but it's not. It's in the Mojo line, but it's actually fiberglass. Um, that was a nasty cranking stick. I slammed it in the tailgate and busted it. And I haven't seen any since. So I don't even know if they make it anymore, but I miss that Mojo glass rod. That thing was nasty for crankbaits. But I did see the Legend glass. So I went and got the Legend glass, and it is, man, for treble hook baits that aren't oversized like Buka stuff. And if you want to spend the $300 on a rod, the Legend glass is money. I ain't gonna lie. Yeah, Frank, that's definitely a thing. Frank's asking, can the algae shade the local ponds and make the lily pads disappear? Absolutely. You can see shifts and it depends on the season. And I'm really amazed out here, like at the differences in the last couple seasons that I've lived in Florida, and the differences in the density of the vegetation on this lake. Um, it's not nearly as dense this year as it was like the first year that I lived down here. Um, and I saw it the year before I even moved here. So um, I don't know. Weather patterns can change things up. Um, Weather conditions, can change things up. So, but yes, what you're describing is a very, very real phenomena where certain plants get the advantage, and then that discourages the growth of other plants. Or somebody came in and treated lily pads. Bass X is 150. Yeah, it's not bad, man. And the other rod that I'm going to go get, man. I've always liked Ugly Stick, but I was talking to, is it Matt Robertson? Is that right? Is he the Ugly Stick pro with the long mullet? They're all tied in with Berkeley, and Rudd was over there in their Berkeley booth. So I was talking to Alex, and then I got talking to everybody over there, and I was looking at the Ugly Stick rods. I made a post about it on Instagram, but the Ugly Stick is making a carbon fiber inshore rod, and that rod looked awesome. It felt awesome too. So I'm going to pick one of those up just to test it out. And I think they're like in the $100 range. $100 I can handle, you know. That seems like a pretty reasonable price for a decent stick, you know. Even I'll go as high as 2. Now, I save my money for the Legend Glass though. I don't think I wasted my money on that. When I want a crankbait fish, I want a good rod. Um, and again, I think St. Croix does a good job doing like specialty type rods like that. I also have a two-piece Croix that's a 10-footer for the salt water and just surf casting rod. And it's by far the nicest surf casting rod that I've ever had. It's big and strong, but it's still light and sensitive too. 10-foot stick. It is a two-piece, but I don't know. I've never fished with such a big rod that was comfortable to fish with like that Croix. You use the St. Croix rods. Mike actually hooks me up. He's got that bull shad rod, but it's a Dobbins blank. I believe it's the Champion blank. He told me, don't quote me on that. You know how memory is, but I've been using Mike's. Hey, Marty, I appreciate you. Thanks for that, man. Thanks for all 13 guys today. I do my best. That's all I can do, right? That's all we can do. But if you're in the market, I definitely would recommend Mike's. I think it's a $200 rod retail, so it won't break the bank. It's 8'3". He's got two of them. I think one of them goes from 2 ounces to 6, and the other one goes from 2 ounces to 8. I've got two of them, so I just bought the ones that went to 8 because I like throwing bigger baits. So. Oh yeah, 6. Hey, thanks, Billy. I appreciate that, man. I'm looking at your other post here. What do you got going? You got a 6'3" Garcia for kayaks? Yeah. There's definitely some certain situations where the shorter stick will help you out, Yes, Frank. Mike fishes them till the paint comes off. He that was an interesting day or interesting week, really. I was with Mike for a while, but yes, is the answer to your question. He absolutely roasts the crap out of them much faster than I thought I burned baits. That's the one thing that I noticed about Mike's baits was they don't blow out. They run true it no matter what speed you throw them on. And that's the first thing I notice about them because I tend to fish faster. I'm not a slow it down type of guy. If the fish aren't biting, I put the speed to it usually. It's a reaction strike thing. Bite it or don't bite it, but make the choice. If I'm going to zero, I'm going to zero fire and moving. And I got in the boat with Mike, and I mean, like seriously, you could forget about jig fishing with him. He's on the motor, and he is rolling that bait, just firing and rolling and firing and rolling all day long. He's like a machine gun, man. He is just chopping. But we've covered it before, but I'll cover it again. Let's say, we got the surface of the water here and we've got the bottom of the pond here, right? So he advised me, I would let the glide bait sink down sometimes and be like down in this area of the water, right? And his advice was not to do that. And it was really good advice, and I've taken it and used that. So if you fish with a plastic worm, right, and it goes down to the bottom, okay, well now if the bass is here and the worm is there, right, and the worm is here and the bass is here, this worm is trapped. It can't go into the ground, right? It's trapped down here. And that always just was common sense to me, right? Like, of course, it's in a trap position on the bottom of the pond, so the bass will attack down, right? But if your glide bait is up here and your bass is here, this this is also in a trap position. It can jump out of the water, but it's got to come back in. It can't get away up either. So the top 6-8 foot of water, whatever, top section of water right there, that's a trap position too. And that's what Mike's keying on when he's doing that. He's putting that bait into a vulnerable position, and then he's moving it with speed. So he's got two things working for him. It's in a very dangerous spot. And think about it. When bass go feeding and push a school of shad, what do they push them? They push them to the surface. They're trapped up there, right? And they're bang, bang, banging around up there. And then the birds come diving in and all that. But that's why they school around and push them up, because they trap them up there. So, the way Mike framed that, I never really thought about it that way. I never really thought about the surface, being exactly like the bottom, but it really is, So you got them in a trap position, and then you're also kind of keying on that reaction strike type of mode where eat it or don't eat it. But you don't have much time to look at it. The bait is moving and it's going by. And then the third thing Mike has going for him, in all his bait presentations, is he's got the upsized baits. Now, I'm not saying he all of them. He's got some smaller baits as well. But the smaller baits, work well up there too. Like sometimes they're on a smaller pattern. We all know that. But again, you put it up there in that trap position. You put speed to it to give him that reaction strike type of stuff, type of bite. And they will literally come out of 20 feet of water right to the surface and jack those baits. I sat and watched him on the depth finder do it. I mean, he's over 20, 25 feet of water in some of the lakes we were fishing in, just whacking them. He did not care it was 20 feet deep. He just kept firing. So I learned a lot fishing with Mike those days, man. It was a good trip. Yeah, you should try them out, hooking up. I don't fire them all day. And some, like I stopped today at the dam. It was smelling fishy and looking fishy around the dam today. I didn't catch anything. I didn't hang out for long. I was just running errands. Today's a good day to get that done. But whenever I drive over the dam, if it's looking good, I'll throw a glide bait around. But that 11-inch trick shad, I pulled my shoulder a little bit. It's still pulled right here a little bit. It's a big, heavy thing. You kind of got to underhand it like a softball type of cast. It's kind of a funny way to cast, but it's a huge bait. It's ridiculously big. Yep, I see. Burn that chatter. I agree, man. Burn the traps. Yep, I agree, Josh. Fast, strong bites. That sucks, man. Breaking rods. I do too, Josh. I think there's a lot to it, my friend. Yeah, the speed. And again, I think we're touching on, you're presenting the lure in a way that most people don't. Because like if I'm in the boat with the average guy and the bite is slow, they're always going to the worm and they're always slowing down. And I don't know. I kind of instinctively came by that, just on my own. But then again, fishing around better fishermen and being around the guys I've been around the past few years, I think there's a lot to it, a lot more to it than I even realized. And the speed, especially here in Florida, these Florida bass are reaction strikers. You can literally be like medium working a jerk bait and just zeroing. Just 0, 0, 0, 0. And I'll be frustrated and thinking about changing. And I'm like, okay, before I change off this jerk bait, after an hour and a half, no bites, let me just try just wilding out with it. Just literally fishing it to, you can't fish it that fast for very long because it makes you so tired. And as soon as you fire up the speed, it's just like a limit of fish in 30 minutes out here. It's weird, but it works, especially on Florida bass. No way. You're not getting that thing was expensive, man. I was thinking about that the other day. I couldn't believe the like I'm fishing with like a $200 lure. It's like, am I an idiot? What are you doing? Screw it. Ship it. Full send. Who cares? You only live once. What am I going to do? Save money and die? That Nessie 9-inch glide. I've got, what is that right here? My buddy gave me this. Is that, no, this is the draw. I haven't fished this one yet. My buddy Mickey gave it to me. It's the 6 cents. But that's a good pattern for here. I like the shape of that bait there. It's kind of a mix between the gizzard shad and the golden shiner. I kind of see both of those in there. It's not as deep as the gizzard shad. It's got the spot like the gizzard shad and everything. But yeah, I'm going to put that one in play next. A buddy of mine gave me that one. Just haven't fished it yet. But yeah, that's the 6 cents draw. It comes in this real nice box too, kind of like that. Very sporty. The draw in bluegill color, yeah. 6 cents does good job, man. I've had some success. Oh yeah, that's the 9-inch one. That one's pretty big. It says on the side of the box there that it's 3.75 ounces. That's considerably lighter than the trick shad. The trick shad's out in the rod tube in the truck right now, though. Like I said, I just use it today. It's like a 6-ounce bait. I mean, it's stupid, man. It is big. It's 11 inches. But again, I'll take you down to the dam and show you I'll show you just massive schools of 18-inch gizzard shad. Just huge shad out there. That 11-inch is small compared to the gizzard shad that are swimming out in the lake. So, again, I'm trying to be as close as I can to what we've got, in the Mimic. I have not seen that, Josh. I have not seen that. All right, boys, we're working on an hour and 22. I'm getting a little bit better viewership from the general YouTube public, keeping it at about an hour and a half. So I think I'm going to keep it about an hour and a half tonight too. It's been doing well though. I appreciate you guys watching, and it's making some money. I'm not getting rich or anything, but any amount of money that I can make from this is awesome, because I spent 4 years on Instagram, and YouTube is more lucrative than Instagram by a long stretch of imagination. And Instagram is hit and miss. It's like sometimes they're paying you, sometimes they're not paying you, and you've got to get like 48 million views to make any money at all, where YouTube looks like pretty consistent. I just got monetized, so my first check's coming in, but it's like $150. I'll take it. That's a phone bill, and I'm on pace to make that again this month. So I'm all good with it. What's happening, Garrett? For anybody who doesn't know Garrett, he's the biologist that comes on with us and discusses all kinds of things. Young man's got a good pond management thing going out in East Texas. Nose is starting to itch again. Yeah, man, I'm glad to see it. Can be discouraging, there was a good thing going on Instagram where I was making more than that. I was making $200, $300, sometimes $400 a month, depending on the reels views. They had a little thing that came through this year. They started paying people again a little bit. I think they're trying to compete with TikTok, but I'm not impressed with the Meta platforms at all. They send so many things where it's like, hey, if you boost this, more people will see it. And I'm like, yeah, well, or I could just keep posting, and then every once in a while one hooks up and a couple 100,000 people see it, and I don't have to pay you anything, because you can pay them, and then like that, you doesn't even get as many views as a viral video. So you're just kind of throwing money away there. It's very manipulative. Kind of goes back to that post that I was making today about people who chase clout. That's what they're extorting the people who think that paying them is going to make a difference, and it really doesn't. So yeah, man, the more we do this, the more money it makes. I'm good with that. And you get to engage people and get specific questions in specific situations. That's important too. Garrett can tell you that. We can talk general all we want to, but every place is also different, you know. So again, that kind of goes back to the how misinformation gets spread around. You take a fact, they read a caption about a specific comment like we made with Alex or whatever, and they're trying to take that and apply it to where they're at, but where they're at, it's not the same situation, and they don't have enough knowledge to understand the differences. They want to chisel everything out in stone, and we have to kind of re-educate people that way. Every place can be different too. You live on Pickwick, haven't seen an 18-inch gizzard? Yeah. Yeah, they're out there. They're at least 16, I can tell you that. They are big. I've shocked some 15s and 16s up quite a lot in Georgia. I monetize everything too, man. Hell yeah. I mean, I'm not yeah, and even like sometimes I'll do these lives. If you see this live go up and then you see it come down, it's because somehow the AI has decided that we said something on here that's not going to monetize, it's not safe for advertisers. I just delete it. It's like, if I can't monetize it, I'm not putting it out there. Yep. See, that's what I'm talking about, Garrett. You have to speak in generalizations. But then guys are taking those generalizations, treating it like a stone cold fact, and then trying to apply it everywhere in every situation. Like we might be talking about a 2-acre pond in Georgia, and they want to start talking about the Great Lakes. And I'm like, all right, we might as well be talking about marlin fishing at this point, because those two things don't go together. You're moving the goalpost 5,000 miles on me. Thanks for that one, Chief. I can't tell you how many guys have tried to argue, I've been fishing my entire life. I was like, I don't care. You haven't spent 15 seconds in a fisheries management course. That's obvious. So be quiet. You will never go fishing and go to the boat ramp and have the dean of the college hand you a degree in fisheries management. That's not how this works. Believe me, I know. I've done both. And it's two different skill sets altogether, really. And quite frankly, talk about things that really the guys wash out from fisheries school and from wildlife biology school. I noticed, because they were in the school with us, because their ego wouldn't allow them to learn. They'd been programmed a certain way by the media and the shows that they watched. And when they got into class and that wasn't congruent, they dropped out. And I'm like, you guys are believing what you watched on TV over PhD level scientists? Oh, this is a bunch of nonsense. These guys don't know what they're talking about. I'm like, disagree. I think these guys know exactly what they're talking about, and it's the dudes on TV that are the morons. And I shut my mouth real quick. I went into that. I was 20 at one time too, and I went in there thinking, oh yeah, I've been bass fishing my whole life. I'm going to coast through this. Man, I got up in that school and I was like, oh man, this is not what I expected it to be. As a matter of fact, they didn't even let us talk about largemouth bass in 90% of the classes that we were in. Some of the ecology school teachers, you don't even mention largemouth bass to them. They didn't want to hear nothing about it. They want to talk about long-nosed dace and, war paint shiners and green-sided la la las and stream ecology and let's hug a tree and kiss a bunny. And you would, if you mention hunting or trophy bass management or even sport fishing at all, you were just shunned. um there's different types of fisheries, and we need all those people. I'm not trying to shame them or anything. I'm just saying, when you go to fisheries school, you don't talk about this stuff very much. This has been cherry picked out from certain teachers that taught certain classes. Yeah, Billy, I appreciate it, man. I think I'm cashing out with you. It's getting later, and I got stuff to do in the morning. 10:40, definitely. I'm getting sleepy too. But so we'll cut it there. We'll go no everybody, let's leave with Billy. Again, I appreciate you guys, and I'll try to get back on here next Sunday night and probably do Sunday nights until football season comes in. That'll probably screw everything up. But until then, we'll continue the Sunday night thing. You got that right, John. It is unbelievable how close-minded people can be. But you just keep posting and keep posting up facts. It'll all work out in the end. Appreciate you, fellas.